Hello, it's Benjamin James Butler from the Emerging Future Institute. And today I am joined by Dr. Yesha Sivian over in Tel Aviv. He runs the Coller Institute of Venture at Tel Aviv University. And him and his team have just released a really fascinating report on the future of universities. Welcome.
Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you.
What is it that you're passionate about today, Yesha?
Excellent question, Benjamin. Always a good start. So I guess what I have been doing in the last 30 years, but I was able to name it in the last 3 or 4, is actually what I call innovating. Specifically, I'm looking at innovation and how we need to change it, and how it is changing, and how we must change it. So that's sort of the general theme, the tagline. More specifically, I am looking at several angles to this issue, starting from personal innovation, how you innovate yourself, to organizational innovation, to sort of national level innovation. Another big angle is sort of technology-driven, or what they call digital transformation-based innovation. And of course, in the work that we are doing here is the relationship between innovation and venture, which is a big topic.
Every industry in the world is being currently disrupted at the moment. As a futurist, when I meet people from industries that haven't been disrupted yet, my job's normally to tell them, well, you're next. Like the infamous hotelier who said that Airbnb wasn't a strategic threat, and now it's valued as much as what the Intercontinental Group at $30 billion, and we're seeing this everywhere. I'm looking through my my daily articles and doing my research, and I see yours pop up, and it was definitely on my mind. What's going to happen to universities? So,
excellent.
Are they going to survive?
So that's a very good question. And the short answer is some of them will survive, some of them will thrive. And what is 100% sure is that many of them will change. The work that we did here on the future of universities starts from the question, and you can imagine like 2 circles. One circle is the circle of venture, what we call the venture ecosystem, and the other circle is the circle of universities. Let's first define the circle of venture. Venture is about the combination of innovation and finance and capital, essentially. And we claim at the Coller Institute of Venture that basically this combination of innovation and capital is the one that creates jobs, creates value, creates returns, and that's an essential part of a modern society where we live in the age of innovation. Now, obviously, historically, universities have played a very interesting and perhaps a major role in this venture ecosystem. And the question going forward is, what is going to be their role? Now, to examine that, we spent about a year of last year to investigate that. We are going to essentially celebrate the release of the report next week in Hong Kong, in a week of conference where we're going to actually discuss these issues. So we are now looking at universities globally and trying to understand what is happening to them. And I think the key message of this report is that we live in an age of what I call de-know-polizing. Namely, universities have lost the monopoly on knowledge. If we look historically at the role of universities, it actually made sense from a societal point of view to concentrate the effort in a particular place. There was some value in connecting the creation of new knowledge, the transfer of the knowledge, and the impact of knowledge where you have a particular geography. Now, That is the reason cities, countries, places established universities, and around these universities you had sometimes developed some businesses and industrial parks, etc., etc. So there was a whole, as we say in Hebrew, megillah of what you can do from universities. And this has actually worked out quite nicely, whether it's in MIT, in Harvard, whether it's in Silicon Valley with Stanford, in other areas in the world, Technion in Haifa, Tel Aviv University here in Tel Aviv, and of course other places all over the world. It's Tsinghua in Beijing. Worked out quite nicely. Now, what is the problem? The problem is that today we live in a different age. It is the age of knowledge. Everybody is dealing with the invention of new knowledge, with the transfer of knowledge, and the impact of knowledge. Everybody. And as it happened, most universities are now not the best place, and this is the critical point to understand. They're not the best place to create new knowledge. You can create new knowledge more effectively in other places. We can talk more about that. They are no longer the best place to transfer the knowledge because their method is very outdated. Plus, the professors are usually doing other things too, so they're not professional. And there are other measures in the world that facilitate learning in a much more efficient way. And even more so when it comes to impact of society, there are also issues here, because what happened, and the classical example is in fact something like in Kenya. You establish a wonderful university. You spend millions of World Bank money or local money to create a wonderful thing. And what happened? You educate the great and the great minds of Kenya. And what happened? The graduate leave the country and move to other place. Because today globalization, good people move from one place to another. They don't stay. So as a taxpayer, you ask yourself, why should I pay? What's the value? So in each of these fronts, which is basically research, teaching, and impact, we have huge problems. A university, in general, we're not talking about Harvard, you're not talking about Stanford. In general, universities are simply not the best place to spend personal money or taxpayer money to do the missions, the original mission that classically we asked universities to do in the 20th century. So this is sort of describes the problem.
Which universities or particularly where are the positive spots? Because there must be areas within certainly universities they're doing some
absolutely
things. Like the D schools, design schools,
yep.
doing some interesting things. What are they doing right that they could focus on more before we jump into your big radical suggestions?
When you talk to people, especially in academia, but also not in academia, you get standard answers. We educate the people so they can find a job. Okay, so what? You educate the people, they find a job, and they go somewhere else. What's the point? Again, very concrete. Here, Tel Aviv. Why should Tel Aviv, which is a Tel Aviv University, a very excellent university, 35,000 students, wonderful, but most of the budget comes from the country. I'm paying taxes. Why should I pay for the professors to write paper that have zero effect on my life? Zero. Absolutely nothing. My kids will never enjoy this. This is a very, very critical point to understand that the nature of the problem today. It's not that they're not doing their job. They're doing their job. The question is, why should I, as a taxpayer, for example, pay for it? What's the value? At the age of globalization, one has to ask, if I have $1 million, what should I do? Maybe I should just reduce taxes and make this place much more efficient for companies to be created. This will create more jobs. Now, this understanding of the problem is actually essential to driving the solution, because there's a lot of discussion. You often talk about people who say, okay, then talk about, what about basic research? Said, what about basic research? Who cares about basic research? Really, literally. The other answer is, again, if you focus on these points, you can sort of decipher the answer. I think the number one message is that universities, but more than universities, the policy makers that are establishing the measurement of universities as well as the budget constraint should push the universities to establish a very clear strategy for themselves, where they literally point out the societal value that they want to create. That's very simple thing. Let me give you a particular example. If you are saying to yourself, I am a teaching place, my focus is to create the best learning environment in X. Classical example that comes into my head is Olim Engineering College in the US. They 10 or 15 years ago decided they're going to be the #1 engineering school. They've completely re-engineered the whole structure for education purposes, a lot of experiential learning, etc. And slowly they emerge one of the top colleges of engineering. The learning experience is tremendous, is wonderful, it's amazing. If you focus on one thing, you identify the focus, you identify also the domain, because you cannot, it's very difficult to become a master of everything. Very few can do that. Then you become a great learning place. An alternative is a place that talks about research. And in this place, my understanding is that if society thinks that research in a particular area is important, the solution, and this is happening all over the world, in the US, in Europe, they focus on establishing research centers. Usually, they're not even university managed or driven. They are simply a collection with a very specific agenda. CERN would be a great example. This is somebody decided that this atom thing is a great thing. Okay, fine. The way to do it, a lot of focus, a lot of energy, international, and really establish something that is great. By the way, notice that CERN, beyond all the stuff that they have done, have generated perhaps the most important invention in the world, which is HTML, and this has created a tremendous impact on the world today. CERN is not dealing with teaching at all, undergraduate. They don't have that crap. They focus on research. It is absolutely clear to me that the future will be a combination of sort of places of teaching, places of experience that essentially will translate the best knowledge in the world into the hands of the students. It's not logical that professors will sit down and develop their own slides. It's just impossible. You better have the top guys doing it, investing in it, etc., and have the professors deal with transferring or become the teaching professors and experience this thing, the efficiencies of that. One has to remember at the age of something like Lynda and Coursera and all these things that there's a lot of stuff that is available out there. So I'm actually very, very positive about that thing. I also think that the model of let's spend 3 years, let's spend 4 years is also changing a little bit. You will see other models. Let's spend 10 years, study 2 months every year. Let's spend 1 year to boost ourselves, learn the Mandarin and China culture, and then do 2 to 3 years of work, etc., etc. And I'm sure there are some institutions that are going to establish these programs.
What about corporate research? I mean, you've said that universities aren't the best place to research anymore.
Excellent.
Can they take any ground back, or is it this collaboration at the level of the institute or the center that you alluded to?
So, well, in certain domains today, namely in areas of computer science, artificial intelligence, machine learning, network, etc., research is simply not done at the university level. It's simply not done. I mean, the research that a university is doing is marginal at best. This is because the Googles and the Microsofts and the IBMs and the, these companies depend on research. So they're doing the best of the best to do the best of the best, and they're talking short-term, long-term, etc. This is simply happening. The classical example is what happened with Carnegie Mellon and Uber. And this is a fascinating story. People can Google it. But essentially, Uber came to Carnegie Mellon and basically told them, yes, we would like to do some basically research on autonomous drivers, and you have good things. How about if we do research? And then in a matter of months, they essentially, bought a building opposite the university, filled it up with the same people, and basically informed the university that here's a new Uber center on that. And this will happen all the time because you cannot compete. If you are really interested in autonomous driving, and you can enjoy the budgets and the data, etc., that you get from Uber, then you will not stay in Carnegie Mellon. This is absolutely insane. And of course, in computer science, it's a well-known phenomenon that people essentially leave the universities to the Googles of the world. A university can strike a deal with a corporate to build up essentially a joint campus to do something. And we have seen these examples emerging in the last 20 or 30 years. I think it's going to be more and more when the university understands its role.
Let's look back at undergraduate education. Do you think there's an opportunity now to actually say, okay, well, we'll have these, like you suggested, we'll have these corporate university collaborations that will do really cutting edge stuff on artificial intelligence. But when you take an 18-year-old, our society needs creative, visionary people now, especially with the age of robots. Can we create more of a Renaissance type programs for undergraduates? Is there an opportunity there? Is that the future? I don't know.
When we talk about teaching and learning in general, there is what you teach and how you teach it. There are two questions: what you teach and how you teach. And what could be anything from very, very concrete, what is the formula to do X and Y, to very broad, how to talk with people and what is empathy and what is design principles, and etc. And let's be creative and let's manage people. So what is something that one needs to decide? Let's ignore for a second the how, because once you tell me the what, then we can develop a very unique how. Now, regarding the what, I think that education in general should always strive to have a balance, again, from a personal point of view, of breadth and depth. You need breadth. You need to know about history and philosophy and mathematics and chemistry and physics and how to, what's the design of this, what's the unique angle and why it's this and why people are doing it, etc., etc. You need to know about all these things. You need to be open. You need to have all this understanding of the world. But you also need to find one or two or three things that you do in a very, very deep level. Very, very deep level. This is a personal choice. Whether you paint, whether you program, whether you write, whether you produce a paper, whatever you do it in a very in-depth manner. There is a lot of stuff on the surface. As you go deep and deep and deep and you start doing something for, legendary 10,000 hours or 10 years, or even more, then you start to understand what you don't understand and how you understand things. And this is a very important point. So I would actually, as an advice to our kids, would say that this is something they should strive to do. So even if they go for X, engineering or design, etc., make sure you use the time efficiently to balance and make sure you have the depth and the breadth of both. I think that's the key. And this will also allows you in the future, 10 years down the road, to switch from one topic to another, to another, to another. Again, people who are 20 today will probably have 100 years or 80 years until the age of 100. If you're 20 today, you probably live until 100. You have, say, 60 years or 70 years of work. So you will replace careers, focuses, managerial positions, individual contributors, etc. So better be prepared. So I think education is becoming a very important point. The starting point is very important. It will happen all the time. Many years ago, I wrote a book called LLL, Lifelong Learner. What does it mean to be a lifelong learner? So I think the industry as an industry will become even bigger. The question is, for a university, is what is going to be their role? How are they going to capitalize on that need in this new competitive environment? That's the interesting question when it comes to universities.
Excellent points. And you never, with these really long careers that the youth are going to have, you just don't know what's going to be useful. There's a famous example of Steve Jobs and he learned calligraphy.
Yep.
In my much less glamorous life, I did law and then went on to do economics and Asian languages and all sorts. Never used law for ages, and then suddenly I'm an entrepreneur again, and people are sending me legal contracts and things, and I'm reading them and understanding them, and then I had this moment of reflection. Oh, hang on. Oh yeah, I learned this. This is why I understand. It's like that French you learnt at school and you thought you'd forgotten, and suddenly you're in France and you can read a few signs. But I think it's deeper than that. I do think a lot of creativity does happen at the in between, at the convergence or the confluence.
By the way, Tel Aviv University, the president is pushing for the last 5 years a lot to interdisciplinary efforts in various places. It's really quite amazing what is happening. Brain sciences is now an interdisciplinary, nanotechnology, ethics interdisciplinary, environment interdisciplinary. So he's trying to build up this structures that engulf several faculties, etc. Very difficult from the professors, but at least he's trying, so that's good.
Well, I've got a long overdue visit to Tel Aviv, so I'd love to come and check things out one day. And I recommend the listeners as well to, if they can't fly over there, at least get on the website of Yesha Sivian's website, the Coller Institute of Venture, and Google that. You'll find some great reports. Really appreciate your time.
Excellent.
And hope we can continue the dialogue.
Yeah. Thank you very much.